that he was holed up in this house in Southwest Atlanta. It was surrounded by multiple law enforcement agencies as they tried to figure out whether or not Groves was actually inside of that home. We don't know what led police to that location. We don't know how long they've been keeping an eye on that situation, but if you'll remember, what you're seeing on your screen right now is when those 10 inmates escaped out of Orleans Justice Center. We do have some new video that we're going to show you in just a moment of the location in Atlanta, the house in the southwest part of town where Derrick Groves apparently was holed up. We don't know for how long. We don't know how long law enforcement has had their eyes on that location and how long they've been waiting to go in. Could have been a tip this morning, could have been a tip 2 weeks ago. Those are details that we're hoping to get as we continue to follow this very urgent breaking news situation this afternoon. So again, if you're just joining us, what we know is that inmate Derrick Groves, one of the 10 escapees from the Orleans Justice Center earlier this year, has been taken back into custody in Southwest Atlanta. There was a lot of questions after this happened about whether or not he had crossed state lines, whether or not he had gone to Texas. Many people in Louisiana have ties to both Houston area, Texas, and the Atlanta area. A lot of that because of how people have migrated since Hurricane Katrina. But lots of people have those connections. There were a lot of questions about whether or not those areas would be where we would find Derrick Groves hiding. And what we know now is that law enforcement agencies from law enforcement sources are telling us that he was taken into custody in Southwest Atlanta this afternoon. We first began hearing about this morning, rumblings that law enforcement may have been working on a tip. And you'll recall that over the last several months, law enforcement both here in New Orleans, in Texas, in different states have responded to tips that they received that some of these inmates had been hiding in those locations. A lot of times it would end up being a false alarm. In this case, that was not the situation. Derrick Groves apparently holed up in the house in Southwest Atlanta. A huge law enforcement effort is what it took in order to capture him. He's been on the run since this happened, which has been several weeks now. I mean, it's been months since the Orleans Justice Center escape. This obviously, breaking news as we have a sheriff's election coming up on Saturday. So very interesting timing and how this is all unfolding. Back when this happened, there were a lot of questions about whether or not the Orleans Justice Center was fully staffed, whether or not they had adequate security. Since then, some improvements have been made to the Orleans Justice Center in order to secure it. But we did hear just last week that there was another escape attempt that had been thwarted at the jail. So, it's obviously a jailer's biggest burden or task or job to keep those inmates secure and in humane conditions at any jail that they're responsible for. So a huge responsibility there. Now, again, if you're just joining us at this hour, it is just before 1:30 in the afternoon. We know that just a little while ago, law enforcement agencies, multiple different law enforcement agencies were working a scene in Southwest Atlanta. That is where we now know that Derrick Groves was found. He has been taken back into custody. We don't know his condition. We have not heard from law enforcement sources how he's doing, how that capture took place. Again, we do have news crews from 2 different stations in Atlanta who are headed to the scene as we speak to try and get the very latest from there on the ground in Atlanta to find out exactly how law enforcement took him back into custody. This is very much a breaking news situation. We have been following this, just for the last several minutes, but this is something that has been unfolding for the last several weeks as these 10 inmates escaped from the Orleans Justice Center earlier this year. This was a huge international news story when this happened. Many people called this a historic jailbreak. Sheriff Susan Hudson has sort of put that into perspective, talking about, the fact that there have been other escapes in the past. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that this was the largest jailbreak that the city of New Orleans had seen in recent memory. 10 inmates escaping through a hole in the wall that had been carved out through behind a toilet. There were bars in the wall that had been sawed through at that facility. And that's when these inmates were able to get out. And there were some other questions that were raised back when that happened about the fact that there were several hours that passed before guards at the jail realized that these 10 inmates were actually missing. So those have been some of the questions that have been surfacing since this historic jailbreak happened several months ago. We've been continuing to follow it as they had several false alarms where they thought Derrick Groves might have been hiding. We've responded to several just within our newsroom once we heard that there may have been a tip that Derrick Groves had been found. Today, that is exactly what happened. Derrick Groves taken back into custody outside of Atlanta in a southwest Atlanta neighborhood. Apparently, he was holed up in a house there. We know that another inmate was also holed up in a house here in New Orleans. May have been an Airbnb situation. That's what we heard from the property owner once that inmate was recaptured. Many of them were recaptured pretty quickly. Derrick Groves has been the outlier. He has been the one who has been on the lam since this happened. And so, again, if you are just joining us, Derrick Groves has been taken into custody in southwest Atlanta. We are hearing that from law enforcement sources. Again, we do have 2 crews that are headed to the scene there in Atlanta to bring us the very latest. And what we're hearing from those law enforcement sources is that he may have been hiding in a crawl space, and possibly at a house nearby that location. So that is the latest that we're getting as those details start to trickle into our newsroom. And as our reporters are continuing to work their sources, myself included, trying to get more information on how this all unfolded this morning. This has been a manhunt that has been weeks in the making, and many eyes on law enforcement as they tried to figure out exactly what happened with Derrick Groves. There were some questions about whether or not he was in Houston or whether or not he was in Atlanta. And right now, let's take a look at this. This is a live picture from the scene. You can see heavily armed law enforcement officers, suited up in full regalia, full SWAT gear with cameras on their helmets. They are fully armed, and this is in that neighborhood in southwest Atlanta, where we now know that Derrick Groves was taken back into custody. So this is a live picture from the scene at this hour. Lots of law enforcement sources. You can see a police vest there. That's an indication that possibly Atlanta police are involved in this operation. We know that the U.S. Marshal's office is likely involved in this situation, given that they have been the ones who've been leading the search for Derrick Groves. That is a SWAT vehicle that you can see right there that's now being maneuvered around this neighborhood in southwest Atlanta. That is what we're looking at right now, is a heavily armored vehicle, likely part of possibly the Atlanta Police Department's SWAT unit. You see a police car there in the foreground, also an indicator that this is Atlanta Police. I'm not familiar with what their police cruisers look like, but that is an indicator that this is actually Metro Atlanta Police possibly helping in this operation. We started to first get word, that looks like Clayton. I'm not sure. Clayton County Police, possibly, which you would think would be a sheriff's office. So maybe it's Clayton, Georgia. I'm not sure if this is like a smaller suburban municipality. We're going to have to kind of clarify the exact details of where exactly this is. Or that could just be a neighboring police department that has been assisting Atlanta police, assisting federal authorities, assisting a number of different law enforcement agencies as they tried to figure out whether or not, first, Derrick Groves was actually in this location, and secondly, how to find him and how to take him into custody. No word from any sort of law enforcement sources about whether or not, he was injured as they took him into custody or what his condition might be at this time. But we do know that he is in law enforcement custody per our law enforcement sources as of around 1 o'clock this afternoon. So this weeks-long manhunt is now over for Derrick Groves. The question now will be, number one, getting those details, trying to find out, exactly how this unfolded this afternoon in Atlanta, how law enforcement ended up getting a tip about where Derrick Groves might be. Of course, we do know that there is a huge reward for information. Essentially, a type of bounty on his head for anybody who was able to provide a Crime Stoppers tip. I believe it's $100,000, something close to that, if I remember correctly, about how much money people could make just by tipping off the police about where he might be. So unclear at this point whether or not that huge reward for information played a role here. We would think that we would get those details as law enforcement, starts to make statements about this for the record. What we know right now is coming from our law enforcement sources. We're all, as reporters, trying to figure out what those details are, trying to get that information so that we can bring it to you and bring you the very latest as we continue this breaking news cut in for everyone out there. You can see lots of heavily armored vehicles. Just take a look at this on your screen right now. This is another heavily armored vehicle that's positioned in and around this house and this neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta. So huge law enforcement presence. I know if I'm one of the neighbors in that area, I'm wondering what in the world is going on there, especially since this has ties to New Orleans, not actually Atlanta. So the residents are probably very shocked about what they're seeing this afternoon. You can see, though, if you look at the different vests of these law enforcement officers, look, you can see Atlanta Police right there. There's a police cruiser for them. So that's an indication that Atlanta Police for Atlanta proper are involved in this operation. You can see the SWAT vehicles are being moved. What we do know, from our law enforcement sources is that, again, this is happening and unfolding before your eyes right now in this Southwest Atlanta neighborhood. What we do have some new information coming in. Mike McDaniel is joining me here in the studio. We're going to continue to look at this live picture. But, Mike, just tell us what we have new information-wise in terms of what's going on there in Atlanta.
Yeah, and so in regards to some of those sources, they did tell us that he was walked out in handcuffs. So that does tell us apparently he is in good condition. Considering everything that's going on, you had all the gassing going on, you had him surrounded, barricaded, whatever the case may have been. So he seems to be fine as opposed to being walked out in handcuffs. We have gotten a statement from the District Attorney, Jason Williams, here in the Orleans Parish. I'm going to read that for you here. Today we have confirmed the escape inmate Derrick Groves has been captured in Atlanta, Georgia, following a standoff at a residence in Southwest Atlanta after nearly 5 months on the run after his escape from Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office custody on May 16th, 2025. Now, it goes on to say Groves' escape represented a serious breach of public safety. You've been talking about that. Of course, the historic failure, as we've seen when it comes to custodial security there at the jail. His capture brings a long-awaited calm to victims, their families, the witnesses who testified, the assistant district attorneys who prosecuted him, and the people of New Orleans who were rightly concerned that a convicted violent offender had escaped so easily and evaded justice for so long. And that brings another section to the fold here is the people who were the victims
Absolutely.
of him, the people who testified against him.
Yes.
They have for months now been looking over their shoulder effectively.
Yes.
We know that they've been working with the Sheriff's Office as well as the District Attorney's Office, State Police, to try and get some type of protection in place, but you can only protect people out in the public for so long when you have someone like this, Derrick Groves, on the loose. So now this brings that finality to them that maybe they can have some closure with this arrest that we now know happened in Southwest Atlanta at that home.
Absolutely. Derrick Groves is one of the inmates who was actually convicted. He was awaiting sentencing.
And the only one.
The only one, yes, who was post-conviction, who was in the jail, again, awaiting sentencing. At that point, he would have been transferred to a state prison to serve out the rest of his sentence. So now you would think that some additional charges would be added to what Derrick Groves has already been convicted of. We have reporters both in Atlanta and here in New Orleans standing by. Alyssa Curtis has been following this story as it's unfolded over the last 5 months. She's joining us now outside of the Sheriff's Office headquarters and Orleans Justice Center with the latest. So, Alyssa, what have you managed to find out so far?
Yeah, honestly, that it's a very fast moving situation right now, Katie. I'm here at the jail, like you mentioned, and outside it seems kind of like business as usual, but I would imagine inside the sheriff's office and beyond these walls, I'm sure they are scrambling. I'm sure they were happy to have some finality to this situation that's been happening for 5 months. 5 months is kind of crazy. It feels like it was yesterday, but also a year ago. We've been dealing with this in New Orleans for so go along. And Derrick Groves, of course, the last inmate to be found. Now we know he was in Atlanta. Several of those escaped inmates, though, were found kind of quickly after we heard the news. We know that there was a huge scene in the French Quarter a few hours after they escaped, and some of those inmates were found there, some inmates found in other states. But Derrick Groves has been the one inmate they seemingly, had some issues and trouble locating specifically, but now we know that has come to an end. That day back in May 16th, was extremely hectic. Now, we know that the escape began in the early morning, hours before several people and most people across the city and the state knew what was happening. We know now that the escape happened or started around 12:30 in the morning that day when they were, we've seen the video of them kind of pulling on that doors for several minutes. It seems like we know once they were able to breach that door, they were able to pull a toilet off of the wall. And after, we've all seen those pictures of the hole in the wall with the drawings that say "too easy" on the wall. We now know that, once they were able to get out of the jail, they escaped through a loading dock. They scaled a wall and then ran across the interstate. This again happened all in the early morning hours of May 16th, but we didn't really know what was happening until much later, and that has been a huge point of contention in this situation. The delay of notification. Now, we saw in the days after the escape, Sheriff Hudson and several law enforcement agencies go to City Council to present information on this, and the big question was, where was that delay in information, and why wasn't the public, the news, city leaders, state leaders told about this huge breach in the jail? So that still has been a point of discussion in the past 5 months, and I'm sure will continue to be a point of discussion. Because of that, we've heard Sheriff Susan Hudson say that there has been several safety and issues with things like locks in the jail, and she's been mentioning that for a long time. But again, that has been a point of discussion throughout all of this, and a question to the City Council: are you going to help fund this? Are you going to help get things done that we need in the jail to prevent things like this from happening again? So still a lot of questions to be answered in that. But again, this has been such a long situation, 5 months now, coming to an end. Now, again, those 9 inmates who escaped but had been refound, whether it was in New Orleans or across state lines, they have all now been sitting in a state facility. We've seen pictures and we know from state officials that after they were recaptured, they were taken to a state facility with what officials say is better security, so they can essentially keep a better eye on them. So these cases are still wrapping up, but of course we'll continue to follow them. Katie, back to you. Yeah, lots of great context and additional information there from Alyssa. I know you're going to continue to work your sources as well as this whole situation unfolds. I'm here with Mike McDaniel. If you're just joining us, escapee Derrick Groves has been recaptured in Southwest Atlanta. Now take a look at this, Mike. This is what we believe to be, Derrick Groves.
That cruiser in Atlanta.
Not sure?
Not 100% sure, but we do believe that could possibly be him being taken away from the scene there. We're going to slow down the video just to kind of give you a look. And we've seen the mugshot that we've been using of Derrick Groves, and it could be possibly.
Yes.
We are still waiting on law enforcement officials to confirm that of course, is in fact him. Of course, 5 months ago when this all happened, you even had the district attorney, Jason Williams, come out and say that he was personally afraid of Derrick Groves being on the loose because he tried this case tried those murder cases along with a couple of other lawyers as well, and they left the state.
They did.
Because out of fear of retaliation in some way.
Yes.
And hopefully, if this, of course, is Derrick Groves, which we do believe it is, that this can kind of give them some type of resolve moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, including all of the witnesses and people who've cooperated with law enforcement in the cases. This was not Derrick Groves' first conviction either, so there have been other convictions that he has been in prison for in the past. And so, a lot of people had been on edge when this happened 5 months ago and for the last 5 months as this has unfolded. I'll be interested to see if we can hear what that person is saying, if that is Derrick Groves, who was in the back of that police cruiser. Apparently, our people at the scene, some reporters reporters saw him being taken out in handcuffs. So as far as we know, he was not injured as he was taken into custody.
And he didn't appear to be right there.
No. And law enforcement sources have said to me that, you know, they really had to search for him, that he may have been hiding in a crawl space underneath a home. Whether or not that was the initial home that they had responded to, that they used gas in, it's unclear. Those details hopefully will be coming out in the next little bit.
And look, there's a 5-month gap of what was happening, right? Who was helping him?
Yes.
We know that he didn't get to Atlanta just on his own. He was in a home. Whose home was it? Somebody knew where he was at some point, and that's going to be a big question law enforcement is going to be asking. How many people along the way actually helped him escape and keep him under wraps? Because Alyssa brought up a good point there, him being the outlier. You never really heard much from him.
No.
Or anything on social media. There were no pop-ups or sightings other than tips that may have come into Crime Stoppers or something, and we heard law enforcement would, you know, vet those tips out, every single one of them, but to no avail. But finally, something came in. Something happened, and we were able to track him down to Southwest Atlanta.
I'll be interested to see if that $100,000 Crime Stoppers reward for information contributed to this situation, and whether or not it actually was a tip that led to his recapture. I know that we do have 2 crews that are headed to the scene there in Atlanta, 2 different affiliates that we've been working with to try and get you the latest information on how this all unfolded and what the latest will be for Derrick Groves as he was taken into custody around 1 o'clock this afternoon.
And that's one of the good things about the partnerships we have with other stations across the country. I mean, they jumped at the opportunity, and we were able to get that video back and actually see perhaps Derrick Groves in the back of that cruiser there.
Yeah. I think we do have one of the reporters on the scene if we want to join them. We have the U.S. Marshal Service. So the U.S. Marshal Service is joining us now by phone. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, hello.
Hi. What can you tell us about how this all unfolded and U.S. Marshal's Office was leading the effort here?
U.S. Marshals, along with several other agencies, were involved in this investigation, and we got critical support from Crime Stoppers G&O on this particular matter as well.
I guess that kind of answers one of our questions there. How important were these tips, and really, can you talk about what led you guys to this house?
Also, this is Brian Fair with the U.S. Marshal Service, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, just to tell people who you are.
Yeah. So the Crime Stoppers tips have been important all summer in getting multiple of the escapees captured. We've been receiving tips all summer, doing follow-up work on them. We received some tips that our people with the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, NOPD, Louisiana State Police, FBI, and HSI assisted us with investigating these tips. And this one obviously panned out. Mr. Groves was tracked to a residence on Honeysuckle Street in Atlanta, Georgia this morning, and we had sent what we call a collateral lead request from the U.S. Marshals New Orleans Task Force to the U.S. Marshals Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force. They went out this morning with the support of the Atlanta Police Department SWAT team, and after a probably 2 to 3 hour, I don't want to call it a standoff, it wasn't quite that, but after multi-hours of trying to search the home, pumping gas into the home, Groves was finally located hiding in a crawl space.
So it was at that initial house that law enforcement responded to?
Correct. It was at the house they responded to late. I guess it would be late this morning on Honeysuckle. And ultimately, he was located in that residence, but it took well over 2 hours, probably closer to 3 hours, to have him finally apprehended in the house.
Was anyone else in the home?
Not that I'm aware of. No, no.
Have you been able to piece together what the connection is between Derrick Groves and this particular house?
That's going to take some time, and that's going to be the subject of follow-up investigative work.
Any idea if additional people may face charges related to this situation?
It's possible. If it's determined that people helped him while he was on the run, they could definitely face charges.
Now, you all have gotten tips over the weeks of where he might be. I mean, how far and wide have you all been searching for him?
I mean, we've had tips all over the United States, East Coast, West Coast, state of Kansas, you name it. There's been multiple tips that have come in. We've had to follow up on all of them. And while doing our own investigation along the way with support from our law enforcement partners, and this one finally panned out.
It has been a huge effort between you all and those other law enforcement partners. I mean, can you even put into words for us what that has meant for this investigation?
I mean, it was a force multiplier where the U.S. Marshals cannot take total credit for this arrest. We were heavily involved in it, but without all the partner agencies we worked with, this would not have been the result. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of manpower conducting follow-up because Derrick Groves and many of his associates are dangerous people.
Can you kind of paint us a picture, if you will, kind of walk us through what happened during the arrest of Derrick Groves and you taking him out of the house?
Wasn't there, so there's really not much I can add other than I know the SWAT team was there. They had to deploy gas multiple times into the residence. I believe there was a basement in the house, and ultimately I think that was searched, and he was located in a crawl space. At least that's my understanding of what occurred.
Uninjured, to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my, maybe some scuff marks, but pretty much uninjured.
And you said that you got the Crime Stoppers tip when?
We received multiple Crime Stoppers tips on Derrick Groves, so I don't know the exact date that the tip came in.
Do you know if any of those tips have led you to Atlanta before, or is this the first one that points to Atlanta?
No, we've had tips in Georgia as well as all over the United States, so we've had multiple tips in Georgia and other places.
You know, so what happens next with Groves? He's in custody, we've seen in Atlanta. What's the next step here?
So if he waives extradition or doesn't fight extradition, he would be extradited back to Louisiana. If I were guessing, I would think Louisiana State Police would more than likely have some involvement in that extradition process like they've done with the other escapees. If he fights extradition, eventually law enforcement would have to secure a governor's warrant to have him extradited back to Louisiana.
All right, well, I assume we're going to hear more from law enforcement agencies as we continue throughout the afternoon. We can't thank you enough, Brian Fair, for joining us and giving us the very latest on this breaking situation. Thankful no one was hurt.
Yes, absolutely. It was a successful conclusion. Everybody was very pleased that no one was hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
That's
we
really one of the good things when you talk
you.
about what the situation that could have unfolded in a situation like this. You have a multi-hour type of, he didn't want to say standoff, but situation at a home, trying to search the home, you're gassing the home. You have plenty of guns on the periphery and the edges and the perimeter of this home. We don't know if Derrick was armed at the time, but for no one to be injured, this could have been much worse.
Incredible. It was really an incredible scene. When you see the huge number of law enforcement that were there, you know, we saw at least 2 massive armored vehicles that were being taken away from that scene when we first joined you all live on the air about 40 minutes ago. They were just starting to leave after taking him back into custody. Can we show that video again? Can we re-rack that video of him in the car? At least that's who we think it is in the car. And now we're hearing from Brian Fair that he was alone in the house. So it's reasonable to assume that this is Derrick Groves in the back of this police cruiser. We heard from our reporters at the scene that he was taken out in handcuffs, that he walked away from the scene. And as Brian Fair just mentioned, no one was hurt in taking him back into custody. So a huge cooperative effort, both on the part of the U.S. Marshals and these multiple law enforcement agencies, both here in New Orleans and in Atlanta. And you can see, I'm curious to hear what he was shouting outside of the car.
There's got to be some audio somewhere. We'll get that, of course. And when you talk about the collaborative efforts here, Katie, another really big part of that you heard Brian talk about is the community. Had it not been for tips through Crime Stoppers, would we be here today?
Yeah, absolutely.
He said thanks to those tips, this is one of the ones that panned out that helped lead officers and authorities to this home in Southwest Atlanta to finally get Derrick Groves back in custody.
Yes, and as he mentioned, you know, and you mentioned, Mike, there are many people who have been affected by the crimes that Derrick Groves has been convicted of committing. You know, he was in the Orleans Justice Center waiting for his sentencing, at which point he would be transferred to a Louisiana State Penitentiary. Now, all the other inmates who have been recaptured have been taken to Angola, to the Louisiana State Penitentiary. It's reasonable to assume that if he is brought back here to Louisiana, that is where he would be housed, instead of being brought back to the Orleans Justice Center until he awaits additional charges, one would assume.
Yeah, I would think so.
Escape charges and, you know, all of those things that the other inmates have also faced. Now, there are going to be some questions for people in that community in Atlanta, here in New Orleans, whether or not there were people who assisted in his escape and assisted in keeping him on the run for the last 5 months. months. You would think that he would have had to have had help. So I know that they have not shown much mercy to the people who have been involved in doing just that with the other escapees. So as this investigation continues, you would think that those are all of the threads that they're going to continue to pull, and that there is a possibility, as we heard from Brian Fair, that there could be some more additional arrests as this investigation continues.
And of course, the news of this arrest reaching right into the district attorney's office here in Orleans Parish. And I'll read a little bit of a small little quote from the Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams. He says, quote, "We will pursue every available legal avenue to ensure that Derrick Groves answers for every crime he has committed and every consequence he has sought to avoid." Now, considering what's happened in over 5 months, that list of charges and the crimes, alleged crimes, is probably going to grow at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There is no doubt that he will be charged with additional crimes. DA Jason Williams is actually having a press conference, or he was scheduled to, at 2 o'clock this afternoon on something unrelated. I'm thinking that we will likely go to that news conference live unless something else is unfolding, to hear from the DA and from some other law enforcement agencies, because there were supposed to be additional agencies at that same news conference. So hopefully they can give us a little more insight into how this played out. But we did hear a lot of new detail from Brian Fair. He said that it's a house on Honeysuckle Street in Southwest Atlanta, that they had responded about 2 hours earlier, that they used gas in order to try and get Groves out of the house. They weren't even sure at first whether or not Groves was actually there, whether or not anyone was at the home, but they were following up on a tip that Crime Stoppers here, Greater New Orleans Crime Stoppers, received, and that led them to this house on Honeysuckle Street in Southwest Atlanta. After that 2-hour plus sort of standoff, I wouldn't necessarily call it, you know, a true SWAT situation where someone was threatening someone and it was a standoff. I think they were waiting to go in to make sure that someone was in there and that everything was safe in order to try and get him. But where they found him was in a crawl space under the house as he was trying to hide from law enforcement officers once he realized that he had been found.
I mean, on the run for 5 months now, that's someone who doesn't want to be caught. So he's going to try to hide as best as he can. And we still don't know what connection he has to that actual house in Southwest Atlanta, whether he knows the occupant or the homeowner, or I don't know whether it was abandoned at this point.
I don't know. I mean, you know, one of the escapees was at an Airbnb. So, it could be an Airbnb. We just don't know. You know, that's one of the many things that I think we're going to be asking questions about as we start to hear from more law enforcement officers and agencies that were involved in this capture. This is a big win for them, given that no one was injured. They took him into custody safely without incident. And so now we're going to have to wait and see both where he has been throughout that time. You know, they're going to try and question him. Whether or not he's going to speak with law enforcement is a question. It's obviously his right not to, especially without an attorney present. And I assume that will be the next step that's taken in this, that they will get him to a police station there in Atlanta and try and question him to see if there were people who actually did aid in his escape and aid in his ability to be on the lam for 5 months.
And we know that was the case for so many of the other inmates.
Yes.
I mean, we have seen so many people be arrested and charged in connection with this escape who were not inmates. They were just friends of, family of,
girlfriends of.
So I would greatly assume that that's going to be the case with Derrick Groves as well.
You would think so. I mean, to stay hidden for 5 months, to get across state lines, you would think that he would have had to have had help. But we don't know the answer to that yet. And I know that that is a very active and ongoing investigation, just from hearing from my law enforcement sources. So still much more to come on that front in the days and weeks to come. But right now, we really are just focused on the fact that Derrick Groves was just taken into custody in Southwest Atlanta around 1 o'clock this afternoon. Law enforcement officers, Atlanta police, the U.S. Marshal Service there in Atlanta found him hiding in a crawl space in a house on Honeysuckle Street.
And we do have a reporter from Atlanta joining us now live to kind of talk about the scene. Hey there, how are you?
Hi, guys. Yeah, I want to take you right to the house because we are standing directly in front of the house that you can see SWAT broke the door down to. They broke the garage door down to. And this is where we are told Derrick Groves was hiding. That convicted murderer, it appears, seemed to have been existing in the garage space as well. You probably can't see it from around the tree, but we were pushed a little bit further back when they put up the crime scene tape. However, you can see a bed frame inside that garage, so it was clear somebody was living in that space as well. I spoke with some neighbors earlier off camera when we were seeing Derrick Groves getting taken away in the car, and they were telling us that they noticed people standing in front of the window, looking out the window. She said there was just some suspicious activity. I spoke with a little older woman across the street, and she told me that she had noticed every time she went out to go to her mail, somebody was staring at her from across the way, looking through the blinds and just watching her. So at this point, neighbors say there was some suspicious activity going on for at least a month. Again, we know Derrick Groves was on the run now for 6 months, but a very scary situation for these neighbors here as well. And like you said, he was taken into custody at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. About 2:30 is when we saw the Atlanta police vehicle drive away, SWAT wrapped up. There is still a bit of a presence here, but it is certainly not like it was earlier. We saw the SWAT truck going out that way. We saw Atlanta police vehicles going in a different direction as well. So at this point, he is taken into custody. They left the scene at about 2:30. We saw Derrick Groves outside of that cop car, and then inside that cop car, he was actually yelling things from the back of the Atlanta police vehicle. Couldn't hear exactly what he was trying to say, but he was yelling out to the news crews that were here on scene.
Yeah, Marissa, while we still got you, that was going to be my question. If you could make out any of the words that he was yelling from that cruiser, because we could see that he was yelling them.
No, we really couldn't hear. We were trying to film it. I'm going to go back and listen to that video because we have it on 3 different cameras here for our news station. So we are going to go back and try and isolate the audio and hear exactly what he said. But we could tell he was certainly trying to get the crew's attention because he was yelling out the left side of the vehicle as the crews were over there. And then as the car turned around and police were taking him off, we could see him move to the right side of the vehicle, started yelling again through the bars of those windows. So he has something to say. We're just not sure exactly what it was at this point.
Yeah, inquiring minds want to know what he had to say as he was on his way out. We did hear from U.S. Marshals Service here in New Orleans that he was not injured. No one was injured in this operation, which I think is something to be thankful for.
Yeah, certainly. And the neighbors that I spoke with tell me that this was going on since about 9 o'clock this morning. But to your point, nobody else was injured. Nobody was injured in this situation. They tell me it was really quiet. They actually didn't realize what was happening. But the one woman I spoke with said at about 9 o'clock, the officers were here. She didn't realize what was going on. And at 10:30, she tried to leave her home, the neighbor directly across the street from where this went down. And she says the officers immediately told her, get back in your home, get back inside, get into safety. And again, she did not realize that there was a fugitive living across the street from her until all of this came out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So it has to be such a disconcerting feeling to know that after this happened, that somebody was living next door who's an escapee from New Orleans and he has been convicted of murder.
Yeah, and she said she noticed him, as we know, he was on the run for about 5 months, but she says she noticed him really for the last month. Again, couldn't identify him, didn't know who it was, but said she did also notice cars going into the back of the house, never parking in the driveway. Another neighbor told me the same thing. He also never noticed any cars in the driveway, which is abnormal, especially when you notice people inside the home. So if you're seeing somebody, like she said, looking at you through the blinds of your windows, and then you're noticing that there are never any cars in the driveway, she just said she knew something was wrong. She didn't know what it was.
And Marissa, one of the questions we were talking about earlier is, was this home abandoned? Was someone living in it? We look behind you and you showed us the house. I mean, the lawn seems to be well kept. There's landscaping seems to be kept up as well. Did neighbors talk about who was living there or whether they knew their neighbors?
So one of the women that I spoke with, one of the neighbors that lived across the street, she said that the house was sold a few years ago. She does not believe the owners that have owned it for the past few years were living in the house. She believes it was a rental. She does not know who the renters are. She said that she had been in the home a few years ago, back when she knew the owners were staying here. But as of recent, she said it has been renters to her knowledge, and she doesn't know them. And I know the shot's going to be a little bit shaky, but if I can, I'm going to have my photographer Nicholas pick up the camera. If you guys will just bear with us. And I want to bring you over here because you really can see through the garage, and it's a better angle. So if Nicholas, I know I'm asking a lot here, but through the garage, you can see what I'm talking about. The bed frame is there on the left-hand side. You can see the door through the back of that garage. It looks like somebody was living in this space. And one of the neighbors also told me he heard it this morning when SWAT knocked down the door. You could hear it down the street, knock down that garage door that you're looking at, as well as the front door of the home that you saw earlier.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's also interesting to me that he's been living there for a month, that the neighbors have noticed him there for a month. And I'm curious to know who ended up giving Crime Stoppers that tip that ultimately landed law enforcement on his doorstep.
Right. We're not sure at this point. We're learning information as you guys are, so a lot coming out. We got sent to the scene at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and we were here for when they took him away in the police car. But a lot of the legwork on this morning we were not here for. I'm not even sure that all neighbors understood the severity of this. Most of them told us that they just realized it was the fugitive from from New Orleans here in Atlanta when we were talking to them within the last 30 minutes. So they were unaware of the scope of this at this point.
All right. Thank you so much for all that great information. That's Marissa Sarback with our sister station 11 Alive in Atlanta. And hopefully we'll talk to you again in a little bit as we all continue to try to get more information on this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Interesting information coming out of that report.
And just to see that house.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like a nice neighborhood. Hearing from witnesses that he was sort of peeking through the windows sometimes to see what was going on in the neighborhood.
Unless somebody else was in the house with him.
Yeah, and they noticed him for over a month now at that house.
They also may not have known who he was.
Right.
No, he was wanted in Orleans Parish out of Louisiana for escaping prison.
Yeah. But it's interesting if he's been in that same location for that amount of time and how much he's been moving around, from Atlanta to different parts of the country. Witnesses at the scene made it sound like law enforcement officers got there at around 9 o'clock this morning, that they were there for a couple of hours trying to get who they believed was Derrick Groves out of that house. It took some gas, being thrown into that house. Yes. And then obviously they broke down the garage door, broke down the front door, had to find him actually inside the house, and they found him in a crawl space. So I think he was hoping that law enforcement would break in, that they wouldn't find him, and that he would be able to once again get away. Obviously that didn't happen. And then something else interesting, Mike, is that we saw him screaming, and you heard Marissa there talking about how he was definitely trying to get himself heard as he was going away in that police car.
Right.
Moving from side to side, trying to get the camera's attention as they were driving away with him, but we just haven't been able to kind of slow it down and figure out exactly what he was saying at this point.
Marissa said she's going to go back and watch that video just to see if she can kind of get a clue in and hear what he was actually screaming from both sides of the police unit there. But of course now we know that is Derrick Groves, who has been caught there in Southwest Atlanta after 5 months. We're almost 5 months to the day.
Yeah, almost.
The 15th, 16th of May, whenever that happened, and here we are on the 8th. So we're almost to that point. So
almost there.
It's a big sigh of relief for everybody back here in Orleans Parish. Because we never knew where he was.
Right.
He could have been down the street from the sheriff's office for anybody else knew.
Right.
But here he was in Southwest Atlanta, because so many people have been in fear, as we've talked about, the people who have testified against him, those involved with the case, the DA's office, the attorneys, lawyers on probably both sides of the case are probably breathing a sigh of relief today.
Yes, absolutely. I think one other thing that is letting them breathe a sigh of relief is that, no one was hurt in this whole operation, which I think is what law enforcement and everyone hopes for when they go into a situation like this. You never know what could happen. And in this case, he was taken back into custody without being injured. No other law enforcement agents were injured.
The best outcome you're going to get.
Best outcome you could possibly get. Now, what you're looking at right now on your screen next to us is the podium where we are expecting to hear from Orleans Parish DA Jason Williams. He had a press conference that was scheduled at 2 o'clock today on something totally unrelated, but we are expecting to hear from him. And then he was supposed to have some other law enforcement officials there with him, and you can see right there on your screen that's state police that's there with him. Not sure if the NOPD is going to be represented, but some other law enforcement agencies were supposed to be there. Again, talking about something unrelated. We're likely going to bring that news conference to you live, just so that you can hear what they have to say about this situation with Derrick Groves as well. So lots of news coming out from the Orleans DA. We got a statement from them earlier talking about the fact that really this was a sigh of relief for everyone involved. Those people who were witnesses in the murder case against Derrick Groves, Jason Williams himself who tried Derrick Groves, the ADAs who were prosecuting that case also were fearful after he had escaped. So this is going to give people, a little bit of security tonight to know that he's back in custody.
And with this news conference, we do expect from Jason Williams, you might imagine he would want to address this first. This is going to be something he wants to talk with, because he personally, as well as his office, was directly involved with the cases involving Derrick Groves, and as well as some of the other inmates who were caught. But Derrick Groves in particular, of course, you had the DA coming out saying that he was personally afraid of Derrick Groves being on the run because of the prosecutorial aspect of the DA's office.
Yeah, I mean, it can be very fearful for those prosecutors involved.
We know some had even left the city and the state just out of fear of retaliation of that.
Yes.
Now, we do expect from this news conference, the DA, you mentioned some other officials up there. I have kind of the list of who's expected to be there. That's going to be the special agent in charge with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, NOPD, State Police, as well as Homeland Security Investigations, joining with the DA's office there.
This news conference is actually about a business that was shut down by all of those agencies because they feel like it was a hub of criminal activity in the French Quarter.
Yeah.
And so that's what they were initially going to talk about. We assume they're still going to be talking about that, and that's why those same law enforcement officials are going to be there. This was a joint operation in order to get this business on Burgundy Street shut down. So that is what the basis of this news conference was, but we also, of course, want to hear more about Derrick Groves and his escape and his reapprehension this morning in Atlanta. Southwest Atlanta on Honeysuckle Street is where they finally got him in custody.
Yeah, in regards to what Katie was just talking about with that business, they're calling this a trafficking operation when it comes to illegal drugs as well as firearms, which is why we're having this news conference. It just happens to happen at the same time.
Yes.
You have Derrick Groves being taken into custody there in Atlanta.
Yeah, some people started hearing, whispers of the fact that there may have been something going on in Atlanta related to Derrick Groves this morning, and then we first started getting confirmation that something was going down, and then finally at 1 o'clock this afternoon, about an hour ago, is when we got word from the U.S. Marshal's office that Derrick Groves had been taken into custody safely at that location. What we don't know right now is if anyone helped him. We heard from witnesses who spoke with our reporter at our sister station that there were people coming and going from the house over about a month's time that they had noticed that someone was living and staying in that house. They said they didn't park in the front in the driveway. They say they were coming in through the back of the house, which they thought was unusual.
Is a red flag right there.
Yeah, the driveways are in the front of the houses there that you can see on that street, on Honeysuckle Street. So very unusual for the residents who lived around there. What they didn't know is that it was someone who had escaped from jail here in Orleans Parish.
When you talk about crawl spaces where he was found under the house, Atlanta has a different type of topography.
Yeah.
It's all different.
Yeah.
We don't really have that type of luxury.
No hills, no basements here.
No hills, no basements. But in Atlanta, you've got some of that topography where you can actually have basements, you can have crawl spaces and things underneath the house, which is something law enforcement would have to be mindful of going into any situation like that would be a possibility. Because as you kind of mentioned earlier, like he got down there, they gassed the house, hoping that they wouldn't find him.
Yeah.
But thankfully, they were able to track him down.
Yeah, and they took him into custody. No one was hurt. And you can see right now on your screen, Jason Williams getting ready to speak. That's the Orleans Parish DA, surrounded by other law enforcement agencies. Again, to talk about a business on Burgundy Street in the French Quarter that has been shut down, allegedly as a hub of illegal activity. So we're waiting to hear from them in just moments as he talks about that. And of course, we're planning on asking them about the recapture of Derrick Groves. So let's listen in.
Details on the ground, because obviously I was not there, but we have confirmed that escaped inmate Derrick Groves was captured in Atlanta, Georgia, following a standoff in southwest Atlanta. After nearly 5 months on the run after escape from the Orleans Parish Justice Center on May 16th. I think across the board, whether you are a reporter or whether you are in law enforcement, or whether you lived in the neighborhood where he wreaked havoc, or whether you were a witness who was brave enough to come forward and testify against him, everybody is sighing a collective sigh of relief, knowing that a person who was facing multiple life sentences crimes that he was already convicted of, and the other crimes that he committed.
Can you talk about the partnerships that led to today's arrest?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you've got the Atlanta Police Department heavily involved, working very closely with Brian Fair and the U.S. Marshal Service. The U.S. Marshal Service has just really gone above and beyond when we have multi-jurisdictional issues. There have been a number of cases in which they've weighed in quite heavily, working with the NOPD and all of our federal and state and local partners and Troop NOLA to try to find him when he was here. Obviously, they had a bit of a lead time in when that was reported to law enforcement partners and the press, and he was able to make good his escape for 5 months. But I think you may remember Brian Fair saying a number of times, Derrick Groves has to get lucky every single time, and law enforcement has to get lucky once. and that happened today, thank God.
And the fact that all of these inmates were recovered, were taken into custody without any injury, anyone shot, anybody hurt.
You know, I think a lot of people were. Let me speak for myself. I was deeply concerned that someone that had been convicted of a double homicide and was supposed to be in Angola would not go easily. I was afraid that there would be loss of life, whether it be civilian or law enforcement. And I don't think we thank Derrick Groves for that. I think we thank God for that, that he was taken into custody without injury.
Well, DA, if you could, I know this is sort of the very beginning. I mean, Derrick Groves captured, that's one thing, but how did he get to Atlanta? And if he had any help along the way, that's something that investigators are going to be looking at.
Look, I'm not going to, I don't spend too much time on this because these folks are here to celebrate a monumental accomplishment for the city of New Orleans, just as this arrest was. Obviously, Chris, if you go to Atlanta later on today, you're going to have some help. Whether it's an Uber driver, whether it's getting some gas, whether it is catching a flight. He obviously had some help. And there will be a thorough investigation to any and everybody that helped him along the way, in whatever parish and whatever county that assistance came.
Last question, what charging decisions do you have right now to make?
I don't want to address that at this point, Paul. It's a little too soon. But thank you all for being here today to focus on 31-1 Burgundy Street. We're standing here at what appeared to the public to be a retail business called Culture Fashion. Today,
all right, that's Orleans DA Jason Williams. We'll have more on the meat of his press conference for you in our later newscasts. Right now, we're talking about the recapture of Derrick Groves. Sharice Gibson joining me now here on set in the studio as we follow this breaking news this afternoon. What we just heard from Jason Williams was, everyone is relieved that he is now back in custody.
We tend to forget here, Derrick Groves was convicted.
Yes.
So with Derrick Groves being convicted, the prosecutors who were involved in that conviction immediately after the escape of those 10 inmates, a lot of them went into a protective custody. They went into hiding because people were fearful that he was still out. And then 5 months later, him still being out still had people uneasy.
Yeah.
So as he mentioned at the beginning of that press conference, it's to the relief of reporters, it's to the relief of the witnesses who testified against him, and even to the prosecutors that he has been captured in Atlanta. Even though I hear the conversation, a lot of people are asking why Atlanta, what brought him there? Did he feel like he was pinned down? And I have questions about the house, because this seems like a typical neighborhood where a person lives. Is he related to the person that's inside of this house? How no one noticed him, because he has very visible features. If you look at his face, some tattoos, some that are around his neck. I'm very curious as to what got him up to Atlanta. And as we've seen in many of these cases, there likely is going to be, around his neck he had tattoos, not on his face, but I'm thinking about Derrick Massey here.
Antoine Massey,
excuse me.
Another escapee.
Yeah, who was captured in New Orleans, no less. But as we've seen in other situations and in other cases connected to this historic jailbreak, someone else had to help him get up there, and someone else likely will be taken into custody.
Yes, and we just heard from Jason Williams, again, the DA saying they are planning to prosecute anyone who was involved in helping Derrick Groves over the past 5 months. They'll prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law, and I think he means business on that front. He has shown, with these other escapees and all of the people who have helped those other escapees over the last 5 months, that he has really shown no mercy to those people.
Oh yeah, they've all been given incredibly high bonds. We've done a story on this because they want to make an example of these people.
Yes.
And we typically see the same situation. They're taken, extradited back into New Orleans, taken immediately by helicopter to Angola. That is where many of them are standing right now. But Derrick Groves is in a very different situation because, again, he is the only one that was convicted and on some of the most serious charges.
Yes, he was in jail awaiting sentencing. Now he'll, of course, be awaiting trial on those, what we anticipate will be new charges of escape and quite frankly, probably some other charges as well that I'm not thinking about right now. But, you know, he'll have to stand trial on those new charges too. But as you mentioned, all the other people have been taken to the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola for a more secure situation because of the concerns about security at the jail.
And we talk about the security at the jail. We just had our Mike Pearlstein, who just left our station here, but Mike Pearlstein really tapped into what's happening at the jail. There was another situation where there was potentially almost another escape inside of the Orleans Justice Center. So this calls into question everything that's happening at the jail, the security situation and what's going on there.
Yeah, and we know that that at least was thwarted in that situation. We are going to continue to follow this breaking news. Derrick Groves back in custody. We're going to follow it for you throughout the afternoon, and we'll bring you the very latest on WWL Louisiana News. We do have some more information. I was going to wrap it up, but apparently you've got some new information coming in. So hold right there, Charisse. We're not leaving yet.
No. Apparently, there's going to be a press conference by the Atlanta police. We're going to be listening into that. That's where Derrick Groves was captured. Obviously, this is a multi-state and a multi-police effort, because when you talk about this jailbreak, I think the furthest that they've gotten, we have Georgia, the others were captured in Texas.
I believe there was one in Texas,
Yeah, there were others captured in Texas, and there were many potential sightings of Derrick Groves. I remember at one point we were talking about him being in Mississippi. Some people had sent in tips saying that he had been in Florida, so everyone was concerned and looking for him. We did not know 5 months out after that escape. You know, that was an historic escape of 10 inmates. I remember that we were sitting here when we saw the video for the first time. That was shocking.
Yes, our jaws dropped.
Yeah, that was shocking, because I think we've never seen anything like that. People just running out of the jail. So, I mean, right now, a lot of people probably relieved, but Derrick Groves, again, facing some of the more serious charges. And Katie, if I'm not mistaken, that's a live shot right now. An Atlanta police officer still out there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is live or not, but we do know this is Honeysuckle Street. That's the house where police, U.S. Marshals, federal law enforcement agents all took Derrick Groves into custody this morning after about 2 hours of trying to get him out of the house. They ended up going in, finding him in a crawl space underneath the house, which is where he was holed up. As he was hoping, I think, that they would not be able to find him and move on.
I'm really curious, as that reporter that was out there from one of our sister stations, if they can give us an idea. We did see him yelling outside of the back of the vehicle. What exactly was he saying during those moments? Because I feel like we saw the same thing with Antoine Massey. Antoine Massey still claiming his innocence. I wonder if Derrick Groves is doing the same. But we do know that last year that Groves was convicted. A jury convicted him of killing 2 people when he opened fire kind of on a family block party with an assault rifle. And they said this was prosecutor said at the time that this was a rivalry with drug dealers. He faced life imprisonment. I know that Derrick, DA Jason Williams, they said they were asking for the maximum penalty, life in prison without parole. We talked about those administrative delays that happened that kept him inside of a non-secure facility under the Orleans Justice Center instead of keeping him and moving him over to Angola prison, which is a highly secure facility. And I think that begs to question something we've always talked about, the number of inmates that are kept inside of the Orleans Justice Center who are supposed to go to trial, especially for some very serious charges. I visited with Sheriff Susan Hudson inside of that Justice Center. She told me at one point that there was an inmate who spent 6 or 7 years in that facility waiting to go to trial.
Yes.
That's not what it's for.
No, it's not. It's not a long-term housing facility, even though that is what it unfortunately often is used for. Just delays in the criminal justice system. You know, with COVID, it pushed a number of trials back, so there's been a huge backlog that prosecutors have had to get through in terms of cases that have been, you know, backlogged at Tulane and Broad. And because of that, you have a lot of inmates who've been held and housed at that Orleans Justice Center for a longer period of time, I think, than they normally would have. But in Derrick Groves' case, he was awaiting sentencing. He was supposed to be transferred to a state facility after that sentencing happened, but they escaped in the meantime. I think that's one of the things that made law enforcers so concerned about the fact that Derrick Groves was out there, because as they mentioned over these months, he really had nothing to lose. He's likely going to prison for life. So he was on the run. He was going to stay on the run as long as he possibly could. You know, his worst case scenario is what happened in that suburban Atlanta house this morning.
Yeah, and one thing that we did discover about Derrick Groves, he has a really interesting history, connecting him to being the grandson, if I'm not mistaken, of Kim Groves. And Kim Groves was at the center of one of New Orleans' most notorious murders.
Yes.
She was a 32-year-old mother of 3 when she was killed in the 9th Ward in the 90s. And unfortunately, this hit, as we all know, the story was ordered by then NOPD police officer Lynn Davis. So really interesting history that we delved into, Derrick Groves, where you can kind of mention that he's been surrounded by this kind of violence potentially all of his life. And many people were talking about his history being connected to the way he is right now. Just to give you an update right now, we're standing by, we're waiting on the Atlanta Police Department to give us an update as to how they led to the capture of Derrick Groves. I see that shot being set up right now. Hopefully they can give us more answers as to what he was saying and the circumstances behind his capture.
Yes, and we do know that Atlanta police, there were some other neighboring law enforcement agencies that were also involved in taking him back into custody there on Honeysuckle Street. We know that this was southwest, on the southwest side of Atlanta, but Atlanta police proper, again, some county police that were out there that had been assisting. You could see those decals on their units, but they obviously knew that they were dealing with a dangerous individual. They knew that this could go very, very wrong. Thankfully, it did not this morning. No one was hurt, including Derrick Groves himself. At least that's what it appears from the photos and from the videos that we've seen there at the scene.
All right, I know that we're standing by for that to start, but let's go back to Sheriff Susan Hudson, who is over at the Orleans Justice Center. She's been talking profusely about this, what she's calling the let out instead of the breakout. And she's calling it that because she says that there were people who had to let them out in order for this to happen because this is a secure facility. We do know so far that, if I'm not mistaken, only one employee has been arrested at the jail, and they're currently investigating a number of people, including family members, people who are connected to these inmates who escaped them, who helped them to escape after the fact. But there are potentially someone else inside of the jail that could potentially face arrest if they were involved in this escape. We do remember that, I know this is 5 months ago that we're still talking about this. You remember that they removed a toilet and cut a big hole, and of course the messaging that was written on top of the wall talking more.
Too easy.
Too easy is becoming thing. I think we're looking right now, they're starting that press conference.
Yes.
All right, let's take a live listen in.
Well, we can give you time. In the meantime, I'll let you know what we got going on. We are going to hear from Deputy Chief Kelly Collier. That's K-E-L-L-E-Y, Collier, C-O-L-L-I-E-R. He's the Deputy Chief of our Community Services Division of the Atlanta Police Department. Everyone rolling?
Rolling.
Frank, you rolling? Got somebody behind you. Are you good? All right, everyone. Deputy Chief Kelly Collier.
Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Chief Kelly Collier with the City of Atlanta Police Department. So this afternoon here on Honeysuckle Lane, the United States Marshals Southeast Fugitive Task Force, in conjunction with the Atlanta Police Department and the Clayton County Police Department, were able to take Derrick Groves, 28 years old, into custody here on Honeysuckle Lane. Mr. Groves was wanted for escape from the Orleans Parish jail in May of this year. He was convicted earlier in the state of Louisiana for 2 counts of murder. We are so thankful for the bravery and courage of all the officers involved in this operation. He is the 10th of 10 individuals to be taken into custody from the Orleans Parish incident.
Everyone, we don't have a lot of information that we can provide, but we will allow for some questions.
What challenges did you face trying to get him out of there? See, the SWAT did a lot of damage to the home.
That's correct. Our SWAT team, with all their training and experience, they were able to bring him out. We deployed a number of canisters of gas to help move him throughout the house, which he moved to the basement of the house. Soon after, Clayton County K-9 was deployed in the crawl space of the location and found him in that crawl space.
Can you talk to us about how you even knew he was here? Was this a tip that came in? How did you guys find him?
No, I can't talk about that. Maybe the U.S. Marshal Service can talk about that.
Is that something you can talk about?
Is this the house of somebody?
Hold on for me one second.
All right, that is Deputy Chief in Atlanta Police Department, Kelly Collier, giving us what very little we know about the capture of Derrick Groves. He said again, this is a multiple state investigation. U.S. Marshals were involved, Atlanta Police, including the Clayton County Police Department.
Is the U.S. Marshal Service speaking right now? Do we want to go back to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So again, as we just give this little information that we do have, the little information that they can share with journalists here, that there was a standoff and the SWAT team did bring him out by deploying gas canisters inside of the house. That's when he moved to the basement of the house and a canine was deployed and obviously was captured.
Yes, they used a canine, like you said, to go into that crawl space, and that's where they found him. And I think he was hoping that they would not be able to find him, but they put the dogs out, dogs found him.
Yes.
So now we're just going to continue to cover this breaking news situation. Derrick Groves back in custody after 5 months on the run, and we'll have the latest for you on WWL Plus if you want to continue with us right now. And of course, you can join us for the WWL Louisiana News at 5. We'll bring you the very latest then. Until then, let's go back to regular programming.
This has been breaking news from WWL Louisiana.